May I request everyone to close their eyes, please. We can all open our eyes. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank AAP, Professor Mark Cruvellier, Professor Ruben Dimchev, and Ms. Apeksha Patel for inviting me. I thought about that one word which could be the title of today's talk. And words are important. We live in a culture, a society, a time and space of lot of information, of lot of words, of lot of hyperbole, lot of exaggeration. And we call our societies modern. We term nations by words: developed, developing, primitive, modern, indigenous, general. Over the years, I have tried to critique myself because I have been complicit, both as a human being, as an architect, as an engineer, in every single action and word which is around me. So I'm part of the process. As a research-based studio, and our business model is kind of different. I've been on the road for 12 years now. I live with the people. I pack my bags and create a local team because it allows me to dissolve. What does it mean to dissolve in a context where you no longer matter? What does it mean to see the world differently, or live differently, or value differently, or imagine differently? So what I'm really concerned about is impact. And what does impact mean? And this circle, by the way, is all of us, because all of us are deeply connected. We may call each other by different names, genders, words, countries, but the fact is the times we are moving in, this relationship of interconnectedness and this impact is extremely important. So the Government of India and UNDP will talk about impact a lot. So we talk about socio-economic impact, but there's also the ecological impact, and there's the impact of the sounds which you just heard from a boat building process, which is 650-year-old craft in southern Kerala called Palayodams, and it left an impact in this room. So there's the social impact, there's the economic impact, because we all perhaps need some money to survive and eat, and there's the ecological impact. And one of the fundamental aspects about us as human beings is this. So we are all going through this cycle of learning, reflecting on what we learn as architects, engineers, designers, poets. As human beings, we are always developing something, whether a recipe in the morning, or tying a sari, or painting our nails, or building a building. And then this amazing act of improving. We are always revisiting ourselves as human beings, in our relationships, in our friendships, and we try to improve. And this cycle, I thought, is extremely relevant for all of us. I come from India. I was born in a southern Indian mountainous belt in a place called Wellington. Now it's called nearby Ooty. The Britishers found the original name too long, which was Udagamandalam. So they shortened it to Uttakamand. Then it became Udagai. Today it's Ooty. Because perhaps our minds are unable to take the complexity of sounds, of spaces, of people, of languages. Everything has to be shortened, perhaps linear. But this also represents time. When you live with indigenous tribes deep in the forest, time is not linear for them. Time is cyclical. They think differently. They live a different reality. They breathe differently. Weaving for them is breathing. So what is India? Many of you over here may not have visited India, but the word does bring up certain images, certain words. Yesterday, my wonderful elder, Brinda, talked about Mahatma Gandhi as one of the most iconic Indians. Today, we talk about India as a developing country. I'm standing here, bare feet, trying to feel the earth, but there's no earth. There's a carpet under my feet. But United States is called a developed country. What does it mean to be in a developing country and work in a developing country? What is the first term which comes to me over the last 12 years, which I have again and again read about, seen, and dealt with? Poverty. Each one of us hears a word and we define it differently in our minds. Words are starters, triggers, critical insights into conversations and our cognition. What is poverty? India has 816 million poor people, out of which 216 are below poverty line. But I want to ask you, what is poverty? Yes, India has economically poor people, but no, they are not poor in their mind, or in their spirit, or in their crafts, or in their skills, or in their wisdom, or in their philosophies, or in their purpose of life. I want to tell you something which I'm suddenly reminded about. When I was 3 years old, my sister was 3 years younger, and every evening we were asked, or we used to have a prayer at home. And one of the first questions which I asked was, what is prayer? What does it mean to pray? And our prayers were very different because we were open to question and dance and sing. So one of the first questions I asked was, who am I and why am I here? What does poverty do? Poverty has a deep relationship and impact on the way we live, on hunger, on environmental degradation, and of course, it's a very complex graph which I tried to create for my own country, and every country can look at this graph and build upon it. So this is a speculative graph. What does that do to a practice, to a practitioner, to an educationer, and to a human being? You always have shortage of time and money. And then you have issues of human behavior and policy. And ultimately, what does it do to education and craft? Now, this is a work in progress, but coming to this place, which is not India, and speaking to people who are already dealing with their own realities and their own struggles, I thought I'll make an attempt to decipher and critique the challenges which I have been facing over the last 12 years. So who am I? Who am I as an architect? I try to define this for myself. So I feel perhaps my role in life or society is to be a catalyst, an activist. Brinda used the word being gentle yesterday and not authoritarian. I thought that was really wonderful. And I tend to sometimes become lost in finding that balance. But I think being an activist and catalyst and trying to innovate or invent new systems and processes and technologies, for me personally, is a very important role to be played. And that goes back to the first question of impact. I'll show you 9 brief projects across architecture, design, and research. And research for me is a fundamental aspect, an anchor which ties everything together. The image on the left is a recently completed project, a collaboration with Flying Elephant Studio in Bangalore, where I was asked to create a low-cost tropical building facade. Over the last 12 years, I have experienced various places of various constraints and consciousness. So there are a million different ways to think between New York and Meghalaya, between Guatemala and Australia. And how do you work within those constraints and yet feel fulfilled or contributed? So this result of 1 year research is a $2 per square feet, low-cost tropical building facade. The bamboo louvers which you see over here are fireproof and waterproof. Now, for those of you coming from India, research, in my opinion, is a huge area which needs reflection, investment, and our attention. And to define it is even more important and create your references. One of the things I learned over my experiences across science, architecture, and design is that R&D can be a huge factor in impact. The image on the top right is an ongoing temple project. It's a small space, 10 meters by 15 meters in a forest in Coorg. It has taken me 2.5 years to do that, and hopefully in the next 2 months it should be done. But it led me to create a new type of roof and a new type of wall, from prototyping, testing in climatic conditions, and finally documenting it. Image on the bottom right is an earthquake-resistant timber structural system, which was done between London and Himalayas, because Himalayas in India face earthquakes, landslides, and flash floods. So you have all of them, and each one of these projects is a very in-depth, rigorous research project. The next 3 projects which I want to briefly touch upon is the project on your left, which is a bicultural woven leather footwear, which mixes semantic and syntactic elements from contemporary sports footwear with traditional 650-year-old Kolhapuri leather craft. The image on the top right are a series of products and systems and technologies developed in Nagaland, which is on the Myanmar border, extremely remote, 16 indigenous tribes, each tribe having their own style of weaving and their own language. And I worked on both morphologies, but also natural coloring processes. Because if you're looking at impact and you're looking at socio-economic, ecological impact, you have to perhaps think from many different points of view. And the image on the bottom right is in fact connected with the sound which you heard when you all closed your eyes. This is a scarf joint, which is inspired from traditional boat building in southern India. So this constitutes 3 references from our design work. And finally, research. The image on the top left is a living root bridge from Meghalaya. It's from a village called Rivai and Nohwet. These are ficus-based ecosystems ranging in span from 15 feet to 250 feet, takes 15 to 20 years to grow, costs nothing, remediates your soil, water, and air, and it takes 15 to 20 years to grow. Image on the top right is a green brick. It's a part structural, part botanical structure. And about 10 years ago, I got really interested in traditional knowledge related to plants. We may call it ethnobotany, so connecting botany with ethnography. And how can that be brought in to contemporary use? Image on the bottom right is a strand analysis or a finite element analysis of the earthquake-resistant timber structural system you saw before. Bringing us back to three fundamental words. How do we all see? How do we all value? How do we all imagine? Is seeing about feeling? Do I feel more from my feet or with my eyes? Is value only about money? Or there's a whole breadth of intangibles which you see and live when you live with tribal societies? And ultimately, how do you imagine? I want to talk about this project called Jugaad, which has resonated with a lot of people around the world. And every time I revisit it, I feel transformed. Jugaad is a Hindi or an Indian word for improvisation, being able to do anything with the available resources at hand. If I have $2 and I dream of a Porsche, how do I go about getting my Porsche? That is Jugaad. And I will do it because I have a state of mind which is optimistic and which will not give up, which will keep persisting till I get it done. So Jugaad was a project commissioned in 2008, December, as part of Public Eco Art Festival in New Delhi, called 48 Degrees, which was essentially concerned with three issues: community, ecology, and architecture. People were invited from different parts of the world. They were given about $10,000 to $15,000, and that's it. And you have to create something which addresses issues. As a young architect, 27 years old, I thought perhaps I can do something, and I was really interested in working with these challenges. And this became my vehicle. This became my God. This became my poetry. This became everything for me. This is a vegetable cooking oil can. In the local language, they call it a pipa or a canister. Now, for those of you who do not know what this is, I had requested my colleagues to help me with this, which would resonate with your audience here. This is the closest reference to the pipa. This is the North American olive oil 1 liter can. Of course, it's slightly better than that in India, because in India the margins are so tight, you're saving every penny, which you will see the repercussions of that. But it's very similar, and I tested this can in Chicago 2 years ago. So what you will see, you can imagine being done with your olive oil can, which is very popular in Greek, Italian restaurants all over North America. I love poetry, I love photography, I love film, architecture. I don't know where the line begins, where it ends. In the local Indian language or Sanskrit, there is no word for architect. The closest you have is a sthapati, which is a sculptor. So who am I? I was walking in Chandni Chowk, which is an exuberant old settlement in India, in Delhi. And it takes you back to a state of being which perhaps a lot of parts of the world were about 500 years ago. There was my can sitting next to a goat. And I thought this conversation was very interesting because I'm interested both in ecology and materiality, and I don't know where one begins and the other ends. At the same time, I started seeing cans everywhere. My life became the can, so I started seeing cans everywhere. When I work with wood, I start seeing wood everywhere, and that is when you dissolve. And I saw this. And I started thinking, how do we see? I started thinking why on the one hand, the goat was sitting to that can, and here everyone thinks of this can as a source for filth, as a place to pack waste. And I thought, is the story only that? Are all of us not cans? Aren't we all vessels? Aren't we all going through our own journey of time and space? And I was left with this image, and I thought, perhaps this is not the only story. Perhaps there's more to this story than what we see. And these were the first few sketches which I tried to do. And this statement, what happens when 1,000 cans fly or decide to fly? Or what happens when 1,000 people, community, decide to fly or come together to do something? This question became an anchor for the whole project. You will see these sketches changing through time, through prototyping, and you will also see our own behavior changing. At this point, I was the only person and with this question, with this sketch. And the project, because it was predicated on a very strict context of a public space, we were dealing with a lot of challenges because this material had no precedent to be used for an architectural scale project. So we collected roughly about 1,000 cooking oil cans from all over Delhi. And what did we do? We just sat and watched for the first few days. Each can was different. Each can smelled differently. Each can came in a different state of deformation, different sizes. But the rough morphology was that of a cuboid and that of a vessel which held something within. And I was really curious about this act of a vessel, of being a container which holds something. So we started opening the cans. And you have to see the people here and the way he's sitting, the tools he is using. So all of you are seeing different things in the image, but I'll try to draw you into certain specific attributes. Also, the people we are working with have no prior experience related to construction. So these were people in the village, an absolutely heterogeneous group from men, women, children with backgrounds from weaving flowers to silk sarees to blacksmithing. So we cut open all cans and we found the edges being very sharp, and I realized I was working with women and children and men, and that's the first thing to do, which is bend the edge. We were left with covers which were also sharp, and we bent the edges to have 967 covers, and each cover had their own personality, just like each one of us. Each cover was still a pixel, just like each one of us is still a human being, and yet they were distinct. The vessels which came out had oil deposits from being used in all the homes in Delhi. So we decided to wash all of them and reveal their character, because each can had gone through a journey and had certain inscriptions in local language, in English. And finally, because this was a totally new project and I was in a village, I decided that I was dealing with something very different with no precedent. So we hired a plot of land in this village called Rajokri, which is next to the Delhi city. It's an urban village. And when you're working in a village, it's very different context as being in the city per se. So initially, no one wanted to work on this project. I had strong resistance because the human mind thought of it as waste. And they did not know who is this stranger, why does he want to work with something which everyone around me thinks of as filth. So I had nobody in the village who wanted to join me. So I started doing on my own, and this gentleman, this young adopted boy of a local blacksmith, he joined me. His name is Dilip. And through the night, we used to drill holes in the vessels and the covers. And overnight, we started having more covers and more vessels with more holes. And soon, I started feeling confident that I know the can, that I can do something with it. Because there's a period in your experience, a critical period, when you go over from the process of not being aware, being the unknown domain, to feeling you know. We will never know, but we still feel that we know. So we started joining the cans together using simple nuts and bolts, which acted as shear connectors, and we started feeling its weight. So you touch it, you breathe it, you feel its weight, and then you go further. And through the process, I realized it has a material behavior, a structural behavior, which is very different from most or all other materials I have worked with, because air itself was playing a role, which I had not thought about before. and the context I'm staying in. So every evening I would go for a walk. We were just 3 people, and rest of the village did not want to participate in the project yet. But when I walked, I come from India. My mother every morning wears a sari, which is a performance in itself. The way she wraps it, the way she walks in it, the way her earring or a jhumka dangles on her ear, maybe it's related to the jhula. No one has documented that. But I start seeing things after 12 years of traveling. So I see color, and I see texture, and I see chili powder, and turmeric, and coriander. And I'm like, but no one told me to bring in color. My education in architecture in Bauhaus did not tell me about turmeric. But the people over here, they live in these colors. They breathe them every day. They don't think about modernism or regionality or crafts or anything. They don't even know who is Sanjeev, so how does it matter? But they love their colors. They love their spices, and every evening, a woman, even with $50, will dress up, take a bath, go with her only shopping bag, and buy her spices. So I tried to bring in these influences into the project. We started testing color on the can. I was delighted to see these images in the first 2 days, but after the 6th day, turmeric reacted with the tin and became black. So we tried out other colors, including other natural colors used in the village. This is henna. This is a local color from Gulal, used in the Indian festival of Holi. And finally, we made a concoction which was a mix of local Gulal, sindoor, which is used in the hair by women, and a mix of local rubber sap. And we started creating prototypes. It was very important to create prototype because no engineer wanted to sign off on this project in Delhi. I tried 6 engineers, and I kept waiting for picking up my phone call and my emails. No one replied. And I finally realized I will have to do that part myself and with my professors. So people who had taught me in school, they said in Hindi language, "Noya kaam kar raha hai, no charge," which means if you're doing new job, no charge. The other thing which I was told in the village in Punjabi is called "Bawda ho gaye ke," which means have you gone crazy? So you had all these statements coming from each gentleman or woman who thought from their own perspective, and which is what life is. Each one of us looks at it from our own experiences. And we started feeling what the materiality is about. At this stage, I would like to show you a small video to get a sense of what is happening in the village. At this point, after this prototype process, we suddenly had the whole village wanting to participate. And there comes a point when no one wants to be with you, to the whole village wanting to be with you. So from 3 people, we went up to about 120 men, women, and kids wanting to be part of the project. And we had a problem because we didn't have so much space. So there were others, including this grandmother, who was sitting outside and just watching. Because she had seen this pipa or canister or cooking oil can all her life. And she didn't know what on earth was happening when everyone in the village wants to participate in this. And what is a village? It not just has humans, but wherever humans are congregating, you have bulls and you have buffaloes, and no architect is taught about the turning radius of a buffalo. But perhaps that's one of the exercises which we should think about. So as I started doing the prototype, because you had Delhi's chief minister involved, and we had to create this in Ramlila grounds, which is a huge public arena between Old Delhi and New Delhi, I started getting phone calls that this won't work, they will cancel the project because they are not sure if this will work. And in December, Delhi was under attacks from terrorists, and we had few bomb blasts, as a result of which I did not know till few days before the project what is my site. Now, when you don't know what is your site, you have to do the reverse. You have to improvise, you have to be flexible so that it can go anywhere. So we decided to make a prototype to invite people to the village and see it for themselves. And we had 4 trees, and we connected about 80 or 90 cans together, and we created this top layer on top of it. The reason I'm showing you this image is because it is crucial to accept failure when you are experimenting. It is crucial to work with materials where you have no knowledge or no precedent and see what happens over time. So this is a natural fiber rope, and you see how it is shearing at this point. I don't have a pointer, but you can see over here how the material is getting cut. And with the wind, in about 4 weeks, the top layer broke. So we realized that we need some modifications and some improvements, but at the same time, the colors at night were working beautifully, and we also loved the kind of filigreed forest canopy effect which was happening below the canopy. Now, we finished the prototype, and now comes the real challenge. Now we have to scale this up, and in architecture and engineering, scale decides ultimately whether it will work or not work. I was also working with about 120 people who had no generic literacy levels. They were wise, they were instinctively alive, they could see me as a person, and they could feel the materiality. They did not have degrees in architecture, in civil engineering, or whatever. So I needed some kind of simple conversation to ask 120 people to treat 967 cooking oil cans. So this is what I wrote down. I said, let's cut, let's bend, let's clean, let's dry, and let's drill 967 cans. The vessels which came out, let's bolt them and suspend them, and the covers which will come out, let's paint it, let's dry it, let's weave it, and let's suspend it. So these were simple words, simple instructions, which allowed the whole village to participate and execute a project of this scale. From a structural point of view, because we didn't have any engineer signing off on this, so I worked myself, did the calculations with my professor, and each can weighs 750 grams, and we created a combination of a suspension steel cable structure along with a honeycomb structure. So when you combine and cluster all these cans together, they start performing as one collective organism, which is very different from a single can. It's like all human beings. If a community comes together, you're much stronger as compared to a person living independently or alone. And we had to revise the way the structure works, the way the drawings work. So the steel cables had to be aligned in the direction of the cans. The steel columns were also recycled, and using a combination of pulleys, they were all connected and fastened into the ground. So now this more or less is like a system, a structural technology, which can be replicated in any place, whether you use a vegetable cooking oil can or an olive oil can, or you make each vessel independently, differently, with everyone's name in it. Ultimately, we took this into Ramlila grounds, and we created, installed it in space, and a very interesting thing started happening late at night. I was sleeping under the canopy with the people who were working on it, and I woke up at about 2:33 a.m. I thought, I'm hearing something, and there was a very soft whistling sound. And the whistling sound in the winter of Delhi is essentially the sound of wind which is going through the perforations, which was again unexpected. So we think we have a plan in life, but actually we may not. Unexpected things happen, surprises keep us going, and ultimately you feel joy, you feel part of a great journey, and perhaps you also feel transformed. Each can having its own reflection and its own interior character, like each one of us. These were some of the people from the village who were participating. These are local nomadic tribes, also adept at blacksmithing. This is Dilip, whom you saw doing holes at the beginning. And this is Adam, who volunteered as a photographer. And everyone just started joining into the journey. These are images at night. Thank you.